The storm broke the ground open before it broke the trees. Wind tore through Blackpine Hollow all night, ripping limbs loose and pushing rain sideways. By morning, the trail near Stonemarker Ridge looked wrong. Mud shifted, roots exposed. Something solid showed where dirt shouldn't have moved on its own. My name is Elias Crowe. I don't go digging unless the land forces my hand. That morning, the ground had already done half the work. Near the old marker stone, granite, split down the middle, I saw iron. Not rock, not root. Rusted metal, square-edged, buried shallow like it wanted air. I used the axe handle, not the blade. Levered the mud back slow. A small box came free with a wet sound, like pulling teeth. The hinge fought, then gave. Inside were coins, heavy, old, yellowed but clean where they touched each other. No paper, no markings I recognized. I didn't count them. I closed the lid and stood there listening. No birds, no water movement. Gray Creek had gone quiet. The forest doesn't react to money, but it reacts to disturbance. I carried the box back toward the cabin and didn't look over my shoulder once. I locked it under the floorboards near the stove. Same place, I keep nothing else. Then I went back to work. Logs don't care what you find. By midday, I noticed the first mark, fresh. A deep cut in a spruce trunk along the lower trail. Not mine. By evening, there were 3 more. Clean lines, same height, same angle. They weren't random. They formed a line, subtle but clear, leading back toward Stonemarker Ridge. Someone had been there while I worked. Someone careful enough not to leave tracks. The next morning, there were more. Different trees, same pattern. Like breadcrumbs meant for someone who already knew where to look. I followed them halfway before stopping. I don't chase signs. Signs are meant to pull you. I went back to the cabin instead. That night, I moved the box, not far, just enough to test a thought. Before dawn, I checked the trees again. New marks had appeared. They didn't point to the old spot anymore. They pointed to where the box was now. That's when I understood. It wasn't the place they wanted. It was the gold. Out here, stories don't announce themselves. They happen while you're working, while your hands are busy and your mind is quiet. What you're watching isn't a legend passed down or something polished for an audience. It's a record of days lived alone, where small changes matter more than big events. My name is Elias Crowe, and this is one of those days. Blackpine Hollow isn't a place people visit by accident. It's a stretch of forest most maps stop caring about. No trails marked clean, no signs welcoming you in, just routine, weather, and time moving at its own pace. When something breaks that rhythm, you notice. Not because it's dramatic, but because it doesn't belong. This channel exists to show what usually stays off camera. No speeches, no lessons wrapped in motivation, just work, silence, and the things that follow you when there's no one else around. Some days are simple. Some days leave weight behind. This story is about one of those days. Before we go further, take a moment to subscribe if this kind of slow, quiet storytelling is for you. Not because it promises answers, but because these stories connect. Each one adds another layer to the places and routines you're stepping into tonight. And I want you to leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. A city apartment, a truck stop, a small room late at night, Distance matters out here. Knowing where these words land matters too. Now, let's go back to where the ground opened and something old decided not to stay buried. The morning after I understood the marks followed the gold, I didn't rush to confirm it. Rushing is how you make noise. Noise is how you invite things closer. I woke before light, fed the stove just enough to keep the chill from locking my hands, and sat on the bench listening to Blackpine Hollow breathe. Wind moved through the trees in short bursts, like it was testing directions. I lifted the floorboard and checked the box. Still there. Same weight, same dull smell of old metal and damp earth. I didn't open it. I wrapped it in oilcloth, tied it tight, and slid it into my pack. If something wanted it, I wasn't going to leave it where finding it was easy. I stepped outside before the frost finished settling. The marks were clearer in daylight. Fresh cuts, pale against dark bark. Someone had used a sharp blade and a steady hand. They didn't slash. They measured. Each mark faced inward, angled toward the center of the hollow. Not guiding someone lost, guiding someone specific. Me. I followed them farther this time, slow, stopping often. The forest felt different when I moved with intent instead of routine. Sounds thinned out. No birds, no small movement in the brush. Gray Creek ran low and quiet, ice hugging the edges like it didn't want to be seen. I reached the old marker stone again without realizing how straight the path had been. The ground there was disturbed, but not the way it had been after the storm. Someone had come back. Soil tamped down, footprints erased. Careful work. I knelt and pressed my palm into the dirt. Cold, firm, recent. Whoever it was didn't dig. They checked, like they expected the box to be gone. That's when I noticed the smell. Not rot, not sap. Iron, faint but sharp. The same smell that had come off the coins. It hung in the air, thin, like a memory that didn't belong to the place. I stood and scanned the trees, counting trunks, shadows, gaps. Nothing moved. That didn't help. On the way back, I broke the pattern on purpose. I crossed Gray Creek where the ice was thin, doubled back through deadfall, then cut uphill toward Crow's Elbow, a bend in the ridge that overlooks the lower hollow. I waited there, pack at my side, breathing slow, watching the forest settle back into itself. Something changed below me. Not a sound, a pause. Like the hollow noticed I wasn't where I should be. Wind shifted direction. Branches creaked in a way that felt deliberate. I stayed still until the cold worked into my bones and the light started to fade. By the time I returned to the cabin, there were new marks near the door. 2 of them. Fresh, close together, same angle as the others. Whoever was doing this had followed me all the way back, or had never left. I went inside, barred the door, and set the pack down without opening it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with the lantern low, the box between my boots, listening to the forest adjust to the idea that what it wanted wasn't where it expected it to be anymore. By morning, the tension had loosened its grip just enough to feel strange. Not gone, just quieter, like something stepping back to watch instead of press. I slept an hour, maybe 2, then made coffee thick enough to bite. Steam fogged the window, and for a moment, Blackpine Hollow looked ordinary again. Trees, snow, nothing waiting in the dark. I left the box under the bench this time, not hidden, not displayed, just there. If something was tracking it, I wanted to know how close that attention really was. I stepped outside with my axe and gloves, doing the same work I always did. Routine has a way of calming things down. Inside and out, the air had warmed a little, enough to soften the snow. My boots didn't crunch as loud, and that helped. I worked the woodpile behind the cabin, splitting logs at an easy pace. No rush, no force, letting the blade fall where it wanted. The rhythm came back quick. Swing, crack, reset. The forest didn't react. Around mid-morning, I laughed at myself. A short sound surprised me. Weeks alone will do that. Your mind builds shapes out of nothing. Marks on trees become messages. Silence becomes intention. I told myself that, said it out loud once, just to hear a voice. It echoed wrong, so I didn't try again. I carried 2 loads of wood inside and noticed something small. The marks hadn't changed. No new cuts, no adjustments. The trees stood clean the way they should. That eased something in my chest. If there was a watcher, maybe it only moved when I did. Or maybe there never was one. I ate near Gray Creek, boots dangling over the bank. Water moved slow under the ice. I broke a piece loose with a stick and watched it drift until it disappeared. Simple things help. They remind you time still passes whether you watch it or not. The box stayed where it was. No signs pointed to it. No smells in the air. In the afternoon, I fixed a loose hinge on the shed and patched a tear in my glove. Normal work, useful work. My thoughts stopped circling and started lining up again. If the gold was real, it would still be there tomorrow. If it wasn't, worrying wouldn't make it disappear slower. Near sunset, I checked the perimeter out of habit. Walked the short loop around the cabin. That's when I saw the mark. Just one, on a birch tree near the upper trail. Fresh, shallow, almost careless. It hadn't been there that morning. I stood there longer than I should have, hand on the bark. It felt warm compared to the air. Whoever made it hadn't tried hard to hide. That was new, less careful, more confident, or more rushed. I couldn't tell which was worse. Back inside, I moved the box again. Not far, just enough. Then I sat down with my coffee reheated and waited. If this was a game, I wasn't going to rush my turn. The mark on the birch didn't leave my thoughts overnight. It was too sloppy, too close. Whoever was doing this had either lost patience or gained confidence. Neither option sat well with me. I woke before dawn, every sense tuned sharp, listening for anything out of place. The forest stayed quiet, but it felt like the kind of quiet that leans forward. I checked the box first. Still there. I didn't touch it. I wanted to know if attention followed possession or movement. I dressed slow, boots last, and stepped outside without the axe. The cold bit harder than yesterday. The sky was low and colorless, like it was holding something back. I followed the upper trail toward the birch. Snow showed no tracks. That bothered me more than if it had. Someone had been careful again, or something lighter than it should have been. The mark itself looked worse in the gray light. Edges uneven, depth inconsistent. It wasn't meant to guide. It was meant to be noticed. Further along, another mark appeared, then another. Not in a line, spread out, like a net being drawn tighter. I stopped counting after the fifth one. The pattern wasn't leading anywhere specific. It was enclosing. The air felt heavier the deeper I went, sound dropping away in layers. Near Hollow Break, a shallow dip where the trees grow bent from old storms. I smelled iron again. Stronger this time. My mouth tasted like pennies. I stood still and waited. No movement, no wind, just that smell and the feeling of being out of place in my own routine. A branch snapped somewhere behind me. Not loud, close. I didn't turn. Turning confirms things. I let the moment pass, slow as it wanted to be. When nothing followed, I moved off the trail and cut through deadfall, changing direction twice before stopping to listen again. By the time I looped back toward the cabin, my shoulders were tight and my breath shallow. The forest didn't chase. It adjusted. Every step felt measured against something unseen. When the cabin came into view, relief didn't follow. The door stood the way I'd left it, but the ground near the steps was disturbed. Someone had knelt there. Snow pressed flat. A handprint faint but clear. Fingers long, spread wide, not gloved. I checked the door, still barred. Nothing missing, nothing moved. That almost made it worse. Inside, the air felt wrong. Cooler. The stove cold to the touch. I hadn't been gone long enough for that. I crossed to the bench and stopped. The box was no longer where I'd left it. Not gone. Moved. Shifted closer to the door. I didn't pick it up. I didn't open it. I stood there and listened to the walls creak and settle. The forest wasn't pressing anymore. It had stepped closer. Close enough to reach without being seen. I didn't touch the box right away. That was the rule now. If something could move it without opening the door, then touching it first only closed off answers. I checked the latch, the hinges, the frame. No damage. No sign of forced entry. The bar was still set the way I'd left it. Whatever had been inside the cabin hadn't come through the door. I sat on the bench and waited. Not minutes, longer. Until the stove cooled enough that the metal stopped ticking. Until my breathing slowed on its own. The box sat near the door, like it had chosen the spot. Not hidden, not rushed, placed. That was the part that mattered. When I finally picked it up, it felt heavier than before. Not in weight, in intent. I opened it for the first time since the storm. The coins were stacked neatly now. They hadn't been before. Someone or something had handled them. Left no dirt, no grease, just order. At the bottom of the box, beneath the coins, was something I hadn't seen before. A small carved disc, wood darkened with age. One side smooth, the other etched with a symbol I recognized without knowing why. The same shape carved into the old marker stone at Ridgeline Pass. I'd seen it for years and never paid attention. Now, it felt like a mistake not to have. I wrapped everything back up and stepped outside. The forest felt closer than it ever had. Not threatening, expectant. I followed the marks without hesitation this time. They weren't scattered anymore. They were clean, direct, confident. They led straight back to the marker stone. The ground there had been cleared completely. No leaves, no snow. Bare earth in a perfect circle. I knelt and set the box in the center. The air changed immediately, not colder, still. Gray Creek stopped moving. Wind dropped out of the trees. Sound folded inward until there was nothing left but my own pulse. I waited for something to happen. Nothing did. That was the point. This wasn't a demand. It was an invitation or a test. I opened the box and removed the coins one by one, placing them on the earth. The smell of iron faded with each one. When the box was empty, the forest breathed again. The carved disc stayed warm in my hand. I pressed it into the soil where the box had been buried. The earth gave way easily, like it had been waiting. I covered it without ceremony. No words, no promises. Just dirt returned to dirt. When I stood, the marks on the trees were gone. Bark whole again. No scars, no lines, as if they'd never been cut. I scanned the hollow once, slow and careful. Nothing watched back. The forest had stepped away. I went back to the cabin lighter than I'd arrived. Not relieved, settled. Some things aren't meant to be owned. They're meant to be carried only far enough to put them back where they belong. The next morning started the same way the others always had. Cold floor, quiet air, the stove needing time. That mattered. Whatever had passed through Blackpine Hollow had not taken the routine with it. I dressed, ate, and stepped outside without checking the ground for signs. If something needed to be seen, it would make itself known. Work filled the hours. I split wood near the shed and hauled it inside in measured loads. My hands moved on memory alone. Swing, lift, stack, breath steady. No rush, no delay. The forest watched without pressing, and I returned the favor by not looking for meaning in every sound. I passed the marker stone on my way to check Gray Creek. It stood the way it always had, split, weathered, unremarkable. No cleared earth, no warmth in the soil. If I hadn't been there the day before, I would have thought nothing had changed. That felt right. Events that matter don't need proof to stay real. At the creek, the ice had shifted again. Water moved clear and honest beneath it. I crouched and filled my canteen, watching my reflection break apart and come back together. The face looking back didn't ask questions. It didn't expect answers. That was enough. By midday, clouds rolled in, dull and even. I ate standing, back to a pine, eyes open, not searching, just aware. The forest doesn't reward vigilance with comfort. It rewards it with time. Time to keep going. In the afternoon, I repaired a loose board on the cabin wall and restacked the remaining firewood. Practical work, necessary work, the kind that leaves no room for stories to grow on their own. Whatever the gold had been meant for, it wasn't meant to stay with me. Knowing that ended the matter. As evening settled, I sat on the bench and let the light fade without a lantern. Darkness came the way it always does, gradual, complete. No footsteps circled the cabin. No marks appeared on the trees. Silence returned to being just silence. I don't talk about what happened out here, not because it was frightening or strange, but because it passed. Things that pass don't need to be carried forward. I stayed. The forest stayed. That was the balance. Blackpine Hollow didn't change after that. Days continued the way they always had. Cold mornings, steady work, quiet nights. Whatever had been uncovered returned to where it belonged, and the forest accepted that without comment. I didn't gain anything I could carry away. I kept what mattered, my routine, my footing, and the sense of when to act and when to let things be. If you've stayed with this story until the end, you understand what it was really about. Not gold, not signs on trees, but restraint. knowing when to hold, when to release, and when to step back without demanding explanations. Some places test you by offering something valuable and watching what you do next. Out here, the only measure that counts is whether you leave the land and yourself undisturbed when the moment passes.